And here we go, starting into a joyful morning here in London and in Mombasa. Welcome to
Nairobi,
Alice.
Kenya.
Oh, damn, I am so wrong. Nairobi, Kenya. Yeah, I guess that would explain why you recently moved. Appalls.
Yeah, yeah.
Thank you to Alice for coming on the Doing Good show, where we are talking about all the ways in which people do good in their daily lives and whether or not they necessarily perceive it to be good, because sometimes I think Alice may disagree or may agree that she's doing something good in the world. Anywho, Alice is head of SAFE and just in general, a delightful person. SAFE stands for the Sponsor Alliance for Education. Is that correct?
Yes, very
Yes.
correct. Nailed it.
Thank you. So tell us about you. Tell us about what you're working on. What's stressing you out? What's life like these days? We're here in 2025. There's a lot of things going on.
Wow, that is such a big question. So maybe what is stressing me out is probably a good place to start, seeing as working in an NGO is always quite a stressful place to be.
Yeah.
I think the main thing that's stressing me out at the moment is that I'm trying to transition from head of SAFE onto the board, and I'm trying to delegate all of my tasks out because we're gonna have people internally rise up rather than bring anyone new in. And I think as a sort of natural workaholic control freak, it's been quite a challenge for me to sort of let go and see other people do things maybe differently to how I would do them, and continue to try and create a sort of an empowering and open workspace even when I want to sort of go in and do something very different to what is being done. But I think if the last however many years of this job has taught me anything, it's been very humbling, and it's that I'm not actually always right, and that there are actually better ways to do things, and that there are a multitude of ways to do things, and perhaps my way of doing things would work for me, but someone else would do it differently, and I think I just have to make sure that I'm comfortable with that. I think the stress of letting go is what I'm feeling at the moment. And I was talking to a friend the other day, and I said I felt like it was a breakup. I was like, I feel like, I've been living this thing for such a long time, and now I'm sort of moving on, and I have to let it go. If you love something, let it go. And I think this sort of the emotions and it's almost like a physical feeling of having to let go. I think it's causing me stress, but it's a good thing because, as I'm sure we'll talk about, I know this is what needs to happen. So I think that's kind of what is taking over a lot of my headspace at the moment.
No, I think that's an interesting topic, that because I feel like a lot of people don't talk about this part of the journey of working in an organization or leading a project or creating a thing, right? Like, because ultimately, a lot of times the media focuses on the story of like, this is this amazing thing I've built. Look at me, right? Whereas we're literally talking about the story of saying, okay, I want to transition this away from me. Like, I don't want it to be
Yeah.
about me. I want it to be about the organization, and finding a way to get people to carry the same values and live out the same kind of impact that you've seen because it's been so close to your heart for so long. That's just super stressful.
It is, and like you can't help but look back and really judge yourself and your time and your work on what happens next. So you're not necessarily like, okay, I did all this stuff and I'm proud of it and I can like put that in a nice box and move on. You're like, okay, if this doesn't work in the future, so if something happens, if you haven't properly like equipped people to manage without you, then do you look back at your kind of legacy in a way as one of like not sustainability? And I think about this, I know not that I'm comparing myself to Barack Obama right now, but I might be slightly. You've
Good.
got to think
Good.
of
I
your
like the
like,
comparison.
you like that segue. Think about it like your Barack Obama. In some ways, his legacy was like Donald Trump, and it's like, how can you think that you've put your whole life into something for such a long time and you have embodied these values for only to just completely change, and even sort of the opposite of what you wanted to happen after you leave? And I think that's something that you have to really reckon with when you're going through something like this. And And although I think you do have to, if that does happen, so if things do go really badly after I leave, you do have to answer a few questions to yourself about what you could have done better. But you also can't sort of let that define the rest of your life and sort of start to think of yourself as a failure because, there's only, this is my control freak side, like there's only so much you can control. And so I think this is like a lot of sort of healthy kind of processing has to come in.
I resonate with that a lot because there's like I guess different parts of like I think back even in my own work, right? That you feel like you finish something, you do it, and you packaged it. You're like, this is as good as it's gonna get. It's great, and you want to pass it off to somebody, and then you have that anxiety that like it's going to be awful or it's going to be great or whatever, right? Like I've recently conducted a transition for myself, and that
Yeah.
process was very stressful, right? I think I don't know that I'm at peace with it, right? Because one of the things I asked myself is that one day when I leave, what do I take with me? Literally,
Mm.
I looked around the office that I was in at the time, and it's like, what do I take with me? And I literally just like, there's maybe 3 or 4 photos that I'm going to pick up, and then I'm just gonna walk out the door, and you're like, well, damn, you spent the last 5, 10 years doing
Yeah.
something, right? And you're like, that's what I take with me. And it's trying to pick those things psychologically or mentally out that you're like, I'm happy with this being my thing that I take with me, right?
Are you
Yeah.
are you still in touch like with the project, or
Yeah, yeah,
are you
yeah.
happy
I
with?
still am in touch, but I think like that process of like shedding responsibility
Mm,
and transitioning that responsibility is so challenging, right? Like it's like it's already been a year in which I've done that transition.
yeah.
And that process for me was very, uh, it was very taxing, definitely at the beginning. And then like I've really had to force myself to like find space by like literally just turning it off because there's certain things that I just cannot control. And so literally I just look at somebody and be like, ah, because if I give too many opinions, then it's just my thing, right?
Yeah.
And if I give too little, then I'm just kind of being like solving yourself. And that's not exactly the
It's a
energy that I'm
it's a
trying to send.
really hard line to tread because you
Yeah.
don't want to disempower anyone, but when you can see something about to go spectacularly wrong and you say nothing, then you're like, "Bro."
Guys.
Yeah, I really get it. It's a
Yeah, that's a
challenge.
frustrating one. But well, tell me about like Safe itself. Like, tell me about the thinking and the ethos and the story behind it, and like where have you taken it from in this next phase? Maybe you could talk later about like where does it go and that kind of thing. That'd be interesting.
So Safe started in 2002. So it's been going for quite a long time.
Yeah, it's a good minute.
And it originally started in Mombasa as a way of communicating out public health information around HIV because this was a time
Mhm.
when, I mean,
Yeah.
HIV, there's a whole other conversation about taboo around HIV, but at the time, no one was going for testing, no one was accessing any treatment because it was just the sort of the stigma around the disease was so much that people would rather die than access any kind of services for it. And so Safe started by a guy called Nick Redding, who was an actor, a British actor, who wanted to do something to try and help this problem. And so it started as a small group of actors in Mombasa that would go around and do plays about and about acceptance of people with HIV and trying to like break down the stigma, provide some accurate information because there was so much misinformation at the time. There still is, but it was really only misinformation back then.
This is the OG fake news back then.
It was the OG fake news, yeah, exactly. And so it spread from Mombasa all the way up the Mombasa Nairobi highway to Nairobi and then to other parts of Kenya. This kind of idea of using theatre to just talk about really difficult problems and to use people's stories to try and break down stigma and try and humanize a subject a bit better. And it was really, really successful. You found people going for testing. You found people starting to talk about it. We actually do. It is crazy. It's 23 years on, and we actually do a similar project in a different part of Kenya,
Cool.
which hasn't got much access to kind of infrastructure and outside information at the moment. And so this really simple idea of humanizing a taboo issue and trying to get people talking is still kind of at the center of what we do. And we do other stuff now, projects around female genital mutilation or cutting, whichever you want to call it, countering violent extremism, adaptation to climate change. We talk about that quite a lot. Started more recently doing mental health programming. We do a really interesting project, which is in a men's prison in Mombasa, and it's all about trying to process your experiences, any anger you have, any experiences you have, and to try and increase the chances of you having a successful transition back into society. So, the sort of the whole ethos behind SAFE is that telling powerful stories about taboo issues can break down all of the silence, fear, stigma, and only then can, services start to take hold or interventions start to take hold. So we're really, a lot of people think this is really fluffy, but we're really like a hearts and minds kind of organization. I personally think it's not fluffy. I think it's actually the hardest thing you can do. I think not anyone, but it's kind of easy to go and dig a borehole and say, here's some water. But to say the water you have not been drinking is not okay, and to sort of try and break down any of the kind of cultural sort of beliefs about the water that sort of date back into your religion, your ancestry, your fear of health centers, your skepticism of the government, your skepticism of white people and NGOs. I think this is where we are really impactful, and I think there's a place for it in any kind of intervention that you want to do.
This is crazy, right? No, yeah, that's a great sales pitch because, like, think about it. We totally wholesale, hook, line, and sinker buy the idea of changing hearts and minds when it comes to politics, advertising, consumer goods. But the moment we start talking about like using hearts and minds as a strategy to solve, infrastructure issues, social issues, and these things, people are like, well, it sounds like you're wasting money.
Right?
But this is how we do everything in the world. But the moment we apply this construct to solving a problem, that actually matters, not just like, hey, buy my next Pop-Tart, right?
Yeah. No,
And
it's so
suddenly
true.
that's
It's
whack.
so true. I think the idea of soft power, for some reason, it doesn't sort of, all like even us with our masters, right? We're talking about all these issues and how we're going to solve them. No one really thinks about soft power and how you can use these more subtle types of interventions to get people to sort of see something differently. But yeah, as you say, like we are all addicted to social media, which is the ultimate like soft power.
Yeah.
It's literally rewiring our brains to think a different way. We're not getting paid to be on it. There's no like microfinance involved. This is just these are like highly trained psychologists who are brainwashing us. I'm not saying that's what we do at Safe, but I'm saying it's
Hey, if you're gonna have one team doing it, I'd rather y'all were out there brainwashing for what we perceive to be good. So you
so
need
yeah,
good actors and bad actors, right?
so yeah, that's kind of that's Safe really in a nutshell.
No, that's really cool. I think about all the different, like, I guess, governments that try to use this soft power influence, and I see this a lot from, like, well, actually, the thing that I see most frequently for some reason, and maybe they're targeting me, is the Chinese government doing agriculture, like, social media, like, influencers, which is like a
Yeah.
big thing where they spent like millions and millions on getting influencers in rural China to promote like the quality of life that you could have being a farmer out in the middle of nowhere, because they want more people to not live in urban centers, and they want
Yeah.
more people to make food for the country. So I think there's a lot of evidence that shows that this is a tried and proven approach, and I think it's great that you're doing it at like a grassroots level in a country that probably admittedly doesn't necessarily invest in that as much, like that storytelling soft power tactic in this form, at least. Maybe you have an opinion on how they do invest in it, but
I wouldn't say invest is the right word. I would say that SAFE is built on a very well recognized way of communicating
Mm,
in sort of more traditional and indigenous cultures, because this idea
okay.
of storytelling is prolific, especially in places where you have lower literacy rates. And this was always the way that information got around. This is the way that you would understand things, is through these stories. I mean, how far back does the stories of the Old Testament and things go? This is how we as people have communicated for a long time. So I think we're taking something that was there and sort of repurposing it. I don't know if it's not an entirely new thing, but if you talk about investment, you think more along the lines of like government giving money to, or big companies giving money to, or sort of NGOs and foundations giving money to. And I would still agree that there isn't sort of investment in that way in it.
And do you want investment in that, or is that something that you believe should be funded in a different way? Because actually, one of the things that I've been thinking a lot about, and especially when it comes to mental health, and not necessarily in the mental health circumstances you were talking about there, but I read this paper recently where someone said, "Oh, you know what? I'm running this social organization trying to solve issues around mental health," and I was like, "Okay, I get it. I understand why you're doing that, and I think that's noble and admirable." And then like, but no one's funding me. And I said, well, that's another interesting one because yes, I admit the funding ecosystem's broken. No problems with that, right? You can totally accept that one. But when does it become a private social enterprise's responsibility as opposed to being the responsibility of the community to solve a mental health issue, right? And I'm not saying in your specific instance, right? I'm just saying, how do you think about who should fund these kind of things? Because I don't know that necessarily the answer is always going to be like, oh, we can find some savior to bring money to us or some government to fund us, right? Like, who's investing in it? Like, why should it be funded, right? Like, who should fund it? This kind of thing.
I mean, yeah, it's such a big question, and I've been thinking a lot about this, but I don't know if I have a fully finished opinion yet.
How dare you?
I
You
know.
cannot have perfect opinions all the time.
Outrageous. Because on one hand, I've started to think that the amount of money that is sometimes flooded into a social issue kind of manipulates that issue into being a much bigger thing. It commercializes a problem in a way. So, out here in Kenya, I see a lot of these really big, like multi-million pound projects. And it sort of creates this idea that you can make money out of solving the problem, or you can make money out of being a part of the problem. And the problem sort of ceases to become what it is, and it sort of manipulates into something different. I know I'm not really explaining myself very well, but I look at sometimes with SAFE, we've had some really big grants and we've had some really small grants. And I don't think I can necessarily say that the bigger grants were more impactful than the smaller grants. I think sometimes the amount of money that's put into something, it dilutes the impact. And I know that's a strange way to describe it, but I think when you're on a shorter shoestring, you have to be more creative. You have to work with other people. A lot of these projects will set up something very unsustainable because they have the money to do it. Like, at the moment, I'm considering applying for this big grant for next year. It's only 12 months, which I think is crazy. Like, what can you really achieve in 12 months? And it's quite a lot of money. And I'm thinking, whoever set this up, why have they only made it 12 months? And why have they made the minimum amount you can apply for is huge? So people are going to be thinking, how can I get up to that amount? Like, how can I get my project, how can I inflate my project to be that amount of money so that I qualify for this grant? Because we all need money. And I just think it's, when it comes back to sort of arts and who should be funding, I think you have to walk a very tight line between having money to make something or trying to make something to have money. And
Yeah.
I think like Kenya really struggles from the sort of NGOization of society. And I was talking to Jill about this the other day, from our course. And we've had like quite big riots over summer, anti-government riots. And I said to her something like, I can't believe it's not in the papers more. Like, why are BBC, Guardian, why are they not reporting on it? And Jill was like, no, you've missed the point completely. This is our house. we have to tidy our house. It's got nothing to do with anyone else. This is our thing. And I think with all of this sort of foreign funding coming in for projects and you being like, okay, there's money for HIV, so let's make HIV the big thing that we all like get money for, and we have all these projects for HIV, and it sort of misses the problem because you're making money, you're doing your project because there's money for HIV. You're not trying to find money for a project that you believe in. So I think there does need to be a real sort of introspection for the people who have this kind of money to think, okay, what am I actually doing with it? And is
I
this
love that.
crazy amount of money to be spending on something like, for example, climate change adaptation? You don't need you don't need to flood a sort of rural community with loads of money to help them adapt to climate change. You know, you need to ask them, what can you do to adapt to climate change? What can you do with your own resources? And then where does sort of some small funding come in? You don't go in and say, I've got $200,000. How would you spend that to adapt to climate change? Because then you start to it's the wrong way. It's starting to be the wrong way around, and I feel it's a very long way of answering this question. I don't really know who
No, I
should
love
be
it.
funding this because I do think money needs to be spent. You know, this is kind of why we have tax, and this is why we have a sort of a system where you work, you pay in, the government provides services because it's a sort of circular thing. But when you've got this sort of idea where you're paying in tax, you don't really see that tax money anymore, and then you've got a whole load of other money coming in from a load of people who you have no idea who they are. It sort of creates a really strange mindset.
Mm, that's fascinating. I've really enjoyed the way that you've told this one because I think this construct applies in so many different places. And the issues that you're describing here, I feel like I see it all across the UK when it comes to publicly funded works, right? Because there's a lot of people who are doing very similar constructs of trying to say, hey, here's the budget line for homelessness. Here's my 100K solution. Figure out how you're going to solve a 100K people solution, homelessness, go, right? And you're like, thank you. All right, I guess, right? And so when you come in to like a completely different context where you're removed, right? Then you set a budget line and say, hey, solve these environmental problems, solve these HIV problems, solve these problems. Here's my budget line for each category. You're like, that's whack.
It
That's fun.
is.
I enjoyed that.
It is. And I don't really know how we got here. Like, how did it all become so bureaucratically removed from reality?
I think you were right earlier about the capitalization of social issues, right? When you try to transact a dollar sign to a social issue, right, and you say this is how we're going to solve it, then you create this trade economy where it's no longer about the individual and the connection. And I think fundamentally, as I understood, like the storytelling component, the stories are about connecting people and about connecting ideas and enabling people to understand issues so that when we start transacting things, we remove the story from the issue. When we start making it purely a dollar sign question, and we no longer understand the complexities behind any particular issue, right?
Yeah.
There's so many things that go into like why people fight against, dealing with the taboo of HIV, right? There's so many things that go into mental health. And when we just start saying, I got a 50 pound allocation for how we're going to solve mental health for this one inmate, then,
Mm,
it gets really challenging to start getting people to think other than the transaction cost, right?
yeah.
You'll find this funny. There was a public sector project that I saw come out recently that originally should have been commissioned probably like 6 months ago or something like that. And they finally got the project out and into tendering, and they've set some ludicrous goal, right? And we're talking like just insane targets that have to be spent and it has to be done by this X date. And you're like, well, hey, why are we doing this, right? Are we trying to facilitate change in the community, or are we simply trying to spend the money so that we can report back to our masters that things have gone well?
Yeah.
And in this instance, it feels very much like things have gone well, master, is the objective. And it doesn't seem to change. It happens year over year. You're like, we did this last year. Why?
Yeah, I mean, that's very
Frustrating.
reassuring to know that it happens sort of everywhere because We had a grant a few years ago, and we had a big exchange rate game, and we said,
Mm.
can we extend our project by 6 months, and we can spend this? And they were like, no, you have to spend it in the next 2 weeks. And it was something like £5,000. And for a very small organisation, I was like, how on earth are we supposed to spend £5,000 in the next 2 weeks unless we basically like chopper it to the Maldives, like team
Yeah.
building? It was just.
Can you imagine choppering 5,000 pounds to the Maldives? Hey guys, I brought a pretty big check in for you guys. They're like, oh damn, what would you bring? Okay.
Anyway, so
Yeah.
yeah, it does. Yeah, it does. It is slightly ludicrous, but I don't have an answer. It's.
No, I don't think anybody does, right? And I think this is a common theme that comes from a lot of these discussions. And like, I've been thinking about the point of some of the conversations that I've been having, honestly, because I don't want to be like wasting people's time by like, sharing perspectives and then sharing stories. Not to say I'm wasting your time. I just mean someone else may think, Andrew, you're wasting my time. And I'm like, I'm sorry, right? The whole construct behind all these things is I don't think there's a right answer. I'm trying to be at peace with like, this is my impact. This is what I can do.
Mm,
These are the stories that inspire other people, or at least give people perspective on different things. Because I have no clue what kind of scale of impact I can have on other people
yeah.
just by one story, right? And that is and I hope it's going to be useful and impactful for other people. But at the same time, I constantly am asking myself, okay, what are we trying to get out of this for people when I cannot give anyone a perfect answer, right? And that's really frustrating. I wish I could give solutions to people about like, oh, this is how we're going to solve whatever, right? But I think part of it is being at peace with not having the answer.
And I think the more you think and the more you learn and the more you experience, the fewer answers you have.
Amen. Oh,
When I was 25, I knew absolutely everything. Like I had it down. And now,
guys, I don't know if you know, but I'm actually brilliant.
yeah, I was brilliant. I was brilliant. There was nothing I couldn't answer. There was no problem I couldn't solve. And now, I just like the older I get, the more I learn, the more I go through, the more people I meet. I just like, is there even an answer?
Yeah.
How?
How? So
How?
true.
Yeah, that's it. How?
How, man? Real. Oh, God, that's real.
And it's terrifying because the older you get, the more senior you are in an organization. So it's like you like know less, but you have to. You're meant to know more, and you have to make decisions. But you don't have the confidence of youth. You have this like terror of experience, and then
The
that's what you.
future. What's happening? Yeah, I agree. And it's weird because like there are moments where I feel like the contribution that I make in meetings is will be like, I'll just ask one question. I'll be like, oh, so did we think about that? And then people are like, and I'll be like, did I add value? And like, wow, you must be senior management. I'm like, I guess. It's very confusing the way the world works.
Yeah, I've just started asking people like, but what do you think, or what do you think the right way for? And people think it's some kind of empowerment technique, but actually I'm just deflecting because I'm like,
I don't have the answer.
I
So
don't know, I
what's
don't have the answer
the
to
answer?
this. What is the answer? You tell me the
Do
answer.
you know?
Someone else must know. Can't be me.
Yeah, understood. Oh, that's funny. Let me switch it up a little here. Tell me a little bit about, I guess, like in the fundraising that you have done.
Yes.
What is the approach that you take? Because I think a lot of people have this mentality that when you think about NGOs, they think about like water charities, food charities. They think about like the advertisements that were going out big in the U.S. ages ago about like infomercials showing starving children, blah 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 blah. This is a unique place to be in the sense that you are hitting story, like you say, soft and fluffy, quote quote, right? Like, but how has that dynamic been in engaging with the funding landscape? Because I think people have no clue what that's like dealing with an NGO that's international, focusing on an issue that's so far from them physically, but they want to fund it.
I actually feel like the way that we interact with the people that are sort of participants and our beneficiaries is very similar to the way that we interact with our donors because it's all about telling people stories. And so you're reflecting a story back into the community so people can see their own lives and they can start to think, is this the right way or the other ways? What are my choices here? And then you use that sort of same story to present to a donor to say, this is the situation here, you can help. So our films, we have five or six films, and they're all about the different issues that we sort of look at. You know, we I don't really even need to say much. I send the films to people. I'm saying just like watch this, and then let's have a discussion. And they are already, as you say, they're not in the UK anymore. They're in Kenya. They're in this place because the film is so you're so immersed in these people's lives that you automatically understand what's going on there. It's I personally think it's a better fundraising tool than any kind of data set or pitch deck or like very well done theory of change, because again you're like with the kind of money that we're trying to raise, it's not huge. We're not in the millions, we're not trying to get like Gates Foundation to you know give us X many $1 million. We're looking at people who have done well in life, have a bit of extra money, and they just want to do something good. And so it's all about hearts and minds as well when it comes to our donors.
Uh,
It's not a business kind of pitch. These are the returns. It's not like a social return on investment. This amount of dollars equates to this amount of clean water treated. Although one of our donors does like that, but it's all about it's all about hearts and minds, and it's all about connecting donors to the people who they're going to be supporting and to the issue that they're going to be supporting. And I think my personal view is that people have really loved it. Like I used to fundraise in medical research before I worked in SAFE, and it was so hard. Like, it was a really hard sell if you started talking about like olfactory cells and all. And people would just glaze over. You could tell it just wasn't a thing. But we did at my old job. We did a BBC Radio 4 appeal. We worked with a young woman who had been in a car accident, had a spinal cord injury, and she just like communicated her story, and we did much better from that one appeal, that one story, than we did from any of the sort of like, here's the science, in this amount of years we'll be here, and
yeah.
these are the papers. People feel, especially nowadays with the world being the way it is, people just want to feel good, and they want to understand what they're feeling, what they're contributing to, and what they're feeling sort of good about. And I think the way that we work really lends itself quite nicely to that kind of international fundraising from like small family trusts or private individuals. And more that is evidence of how this kind of participatory two-way storytelling, like democratic style of working with a vulnerable community is very, very impactful. Like, it's quite trendy, even as you're doing research, like this idea of like action research, and it being like you're not just like an outsider looking at a problem or looking at a group of people. You're interacting with the people, and you're asking the people themselves, what do you think the trends are? What do you think your issues are, and how do you want to solve them, and how does this link in with the rest of the world? And I think more and more people are recognizing, in a sort of, for want of a better word, kind of post-colonial NGO style world, are recognizing that this is a really good thing. So I think I found people have been quite receptive to our work and what we're doing. I mean, it helps that we also have some really phenomenal storytellers in our organization who really know how to get people kind of on their side. But
Yeah.
again, it's all through stories. Like, I'd say one of our best kind of ambassadors within SAFE, he has been living with HIV for, the last 25 years. He's so open about his journey, so open about his story. Through him telling his story, we've been able to sort of get so much support for our HIV program, because people want, they want to, they believe in his truth, which again sounds very therapy talky, but they really believe in his motivations and his reasoning, and they want to engage in it. And I think that is what I've found to be the best way to try and get people to pay attention to something. I mean, I've seen a lot of people who look at things like, especially around FGM, there's this big movement to show how much money would be needed over the next 10 years to completely eradicate the practice. I can't remember what they came up, but it's in the hundreds of millions. They're like, we need, 300 million to end FGM in the next 10 years. I don't really think that's as impactful as having a survivor sit down in front of you and say, "This is what happened. I'm
Yeah.
going to stop it. Help me."
Yeah. 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 I resonate 100%. And I think there's just so much, I don't want to say trash out there, but there's so much trash in the world in terms of information that bombards you that
Yeah.
when you hear a real story and it connects and it makes a difference for you personally, then you want to take action. It's like, this is something I actually said so many times to all the social entrepreneurs and social business founders that keep trying to start social organizations. They're like, I've got this idea, and I'm like, that's great, I love that, right? But so many people are bombarded nonstop with this, like, in this narrative, and we have to
Yeah.
find ways to compel them, and that's inspiring, right? Like, it's given me some ideas actually that I need to, like, go tell someone else that, hey, look, Ash, maybe we should think about storytelling in this way, because I don't know how else we can get people to take action, because it's so hard to do things these days. To get people to do something, it is so much work, right? Because it's this huge sense of hopelessness. Obviously, I'm not speaking about necessarily the ultra wealthy, because the ultra wealthy, they just say, no, no, no. But, like, for people to take action, right? They need something that resonates. It is so hard to find something that resonates these days.
It really is. And as you say, people are, and I think there's that sort of news fatigue where people are sort of moving away from the news. They don't want to engage. There's some horrible things going on out there. I understand it. But you break it down into someone's personal story, and it's not this huge global problem that's unsurmountable. It's just one person with a story. And I think, I, I mean,
I
I've been
get
accused of being a storyteller too many times.
That's okay. I think we need more storytellers and less quants. Like, I know that's another contentious take, because, like, there's so much data, but everyone tries to get, like, data points for things that maybe, to our earlier point, should not be put in the structure of raw quantifiable data, right? So, like, in the sense of, like, this is how happy you are. It's like, should we be evaluating that? And, like, this is how much net worth you bring to society. Like, should we start doing that? Like, oh, guys, maybe we're still valuable people without being bucketed by how much dollar signs we make. Okay, that was a little too frou-frou, so maybe I'll take
No, no,
that back.
no. I am so on board with that. I have a real problem with things like GDP because I'm like, what does this really mean? Like, yes, your gross domestic product, how much money is in your economy, but what does that really mean to the quality of life in your country? What does that really mean to your sort of environmental footprint? What does that mean to how you show up on the world stage? Surely we should be stopped judged, like not be judged by these things anymore.
I would hope so. That's a thing that we will hope that one of our colleagues will figure out how to solve that problem, because I
Yeah,
think
I'm not
people are
going
really
near it.
entrenched. So, okay, let me do one final thing here, because I think, like, there's a question that really, I think most people would not have taken the steps that that you've taken to go, leave the UK, move to another country, start working in NGO. There's a lot of steps there that most people would not have been like, woohoo! Yeah, could you share, some, like, share the experience? Like, what made you, why? What do you advise that people look out for if they want to do this? What do you advise that people don't do when they're thinking about something like this?
So I wish that I had a really, as we've just been talking about origin stories, I wish I had a really great origin story for why I was moved to do any of this. But the honest truth is, I kind of just do things and think about it afterwards.
Yeah.
I was living in London. I didn't particularly love it, and I met the founder of Safe, and I just something about the way he spoke about it just really appealed to me. So I quit my job, moved out of my house, and went to Kenya. I was only meant to be there for like a month. Just gonna, because I already knew, I already had a background in fundraising. So I was just gonna go, like, do some funding applications, maybe put together a fundraising strategy, come back to my life and, like, and move on. 1 month became 3 months, 3 months became 6 months. Then all of a sudden I found myself with a work permit and a job. I don't think there was ever a moment where I actively made the decision to move. And I think if you speak to my mum, she thinks I still haven't made that decision. She is convinced that I'm coming back any minute now, because I never really told her that I was moving, because I never meant to move. It was a big I just took what life gave me at the time. Now, I don't have any regrets, But if I was talking to someone who was my age, who's 25, a sort of British white woman saying, I'm going to move to Kenya and I'm going to go and work in a Kenyan grassroots NGO, I think I would probably advise her to rethink, because I was very naive about the politics of being a white person in Kenya and what it meant to be white in Kenya. I mean, obviously, I'm not so sheltered. I knew history, I knew what had been, but I don't think I was really cognizant of what still existed. And I think I sometimes look and think, was I the best person for the job that I took on? Should it have been done differently? Should it have been someone else? And I think if I had my time again and I know what I know now, I probably would have done things slightly differently. I think I would have gone, I did not think about this as deeply as I should have done, and I should have thought about it a bit more deeply. And I think I'm really proud of what we've done together, me and the team at SAFE, and I'm very happy that I'm now moving on, because I think it's the right thing. But could the fact that I was not Kenyan, I was British, have changed the way the organization run and the way that people engage with us in a way that perhaps isn't helpful? I don't have, yes or no, I'm not sure, but I think it's a very real possibility. So now I'm at this more of a transition stage. I'm trying to think a bit more deeply about what kind of job I do next, how I'm involved. Because even, as I said, we're all in the business of storytelling. The storyteller is as important as the story. And so I think I would have done, I think I just had that in mind a bit more had I been maybe a bit older and wiser, maybe even asked for someone's opinion rather than just like going like gung-ho into this life. But I really like it here, and I feel like Kenya is a land of opportunity. There is so much you can do, and there's a real like entrepreneurial mindset in a very creative way, maybe not so much in a sort of tech bro kind of way, more in a no one's coming to help us really solve these problems despite all the money that's being pumped in. So what can we do, and how can we use our own resources to survive really in a place where the government doesn't provide that much for you? So I love the feeling of kind of movement and opportunity here, and the mindset of movement and opportunity. And so I think I do, in a strange way, I do think it's the right place for me to be, but I think now it's a really good time to reset and think about what I can do here that is that's more appropriate for where I come from and the history of, white people in Africa, but in Kenya in particular. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, one, I admire you so much for it, because I think there are a lot of people who talk about doing something. And while I appreciate that, you think about it in the context of like being more thoughtful and reflecting more deeply about it, I admire the energy that it took to go in and do it. And even if that's sometimes with a little bit of naivete, as you said, right? That, just, I'm coming, you just jump in, I think the action is possibly more critical than inaction. That your willingness to reflect on that now and in this transition phase is magnificent, because I doubt that you have lost that kind of action scrappiness to just say, like, I'm going to get in there and we're going to do something, right?
Yeah.
And so I doubt that has left who you are. And I think that's one of the reasons I do love talking to you and hanging out with you, because I feel like you are a doer, right? And I think that makes a big difference when it comes to the issues, because I get really angry about the talkers. Like, the talkers are fun, but they really piss me off.
I do talk a lot as well, though. There's no absence
no
of that.
Comment. No comment. I will save that for when I see you next. And then the third thing is, I think in many ways, like you had said that, it really fits you. I feel like just from the 45 minutes we spent talking, I have felt that energy that you've described about Kenya, and it's kind of scrappy entrepreneurial I don't want to use the word entrepreneurial because entrepreneurial just feels like it fits business only.
Yeah.
Like problem solving, creativity, to just get in there and create solutions and take ownership. I feel like that's imprinted upon your personality a lot. Just because, like, that's what you've been doing, that's what you've been working with, and I think it's really fun.
It is fun. It really is fun. I mean, sometimes it's very exhausting, and there's been a lot of tropical illnesses in the process. But
Woo! Love a decent malaria.
but thank you for saying that. That's really kind. Yeah, it's funny because you might have this as well, having moved countries. You sort of don't really belong at home anymore because you've changed so much through your exposure to a new place. But then
My eyes are opened.
and you don't really belong in that new place because you're not from there, and you do have a different upbringing and different culture. So it's this weird sort of limbo of personalities.
Yeah, I do feel like I have to wear different hats in different places. And I think that's something that I have found amusing,
Hmm.
and I I enjoy it. I do think that there are moments where I'm definitely like, if I go back, and I'm sure you probably feel this as well, that when you go home, you're like, yeah, this is home. I kind of fit in here a little bit. And then you take off again, you're like, man, I'm glad to be back to where I am now.
Yeah, that is
Uh,
very true. It's because I can be so British, like the most British, and then sometimes
yeah,
I
I think
don't
so too.
feel quite like that. It's just, yeah, it's a very split personality, but it makes life interesting,
And,
I think.
variety is the spice of life, right? So that's what it comes down to.
Yeah.
Okay, final thing from you then. What would you say to anybody who's thinking about what ways they can, just make life a little bit more, I would say, meaningful, so that what they feel like they're doing does some kind of good? What kind of tips and tricks would you say? Like, what things ground you? How do you keep going? Like, what things do you tell yourself to keep doing good in your life as best as possible? That is.
Yeah, I think if people. I mean, I'm quite a optimist really about people and life, and I think purposefully doing good in your little corner of the world is the sort of the most manageable way I feel to do it. So you might not like work in a charity or for a social cause or something, but if you can make the place that you're in better, for your staff or for the environment, for the community that you happen to be interacting with. I think that's a really great place to start. I mean, and just think
Mm.
about, what are your values and do you live your values through work? Because I think we can get a bit corrupted by needing to sort of make money or needing to meet certain objectives, or the stress of working on low resources, and that can make you maybe make decisions that or treat people in a way that you never normally would. And I think it's just holding true to those values, and whenever you're trying to make a decision, just remembering sort of who it is you are and how you would want to treat people, and have that being the sort of central thing that drives you. I think you don't necessarily need to sort of work in a social organization to really make the world a brighter place. I think the world sort of starts to become really scary and ugly when people are just making not nice decisions in whatever capacity they're in, whether you're a leader, you're a businessman,
Focusing too much on the transaction, the money, right?
yeah, and thinking more about what is the right. I think we all know what the right thing to do is, and just sort of centering the right thing in whatever you're doing in your day-to-day life. I think that would be my
Big one.
advice. Yeah, I don't
It's good.
always do that
All right.
myself, let's be honest.
I mean, we're human, right? Like, I don't get me wrong. If someone's like, "Hey, Andrew, you're gonna make a lot of money," but like, "Damn, okay,
Exactly.
tell
Okay,
me more."
okay, how many trees do I have to cut down? Could I?
Yeah, exactly. God, what a
Yeah.
struggle.
So I think maybe that would be my sort of my parting shot. And I think it makes you, it does make you feel when you're interacting positively with the world. And I think we all struggle with mental health in this day and age. And I think one of the best ways to make yourself feel good is to do good and to act good,
Yeah, I
basically.
think it'd be far more rewarding. I agree 100%.
Yeah. Yeah.
Amazing. Thank
So
you.
that's
I
where I am.
appreciate it. Lots of love. Thank you for doing all of this conversation with us. I appreciate it immensely. And with that, we're gonna clock out. Bye.
Thank you.